Okay, I think people will still be joining, but I think we'll make a start now. So welcome to the second Thinking Place webinar. My name's John Till. I'm the founding director of Thinking Place. It's great to see so many of you on the session. I know that there are some old friends and some new ones. Sadly, I can't actually see you all, and even better it would be if I could be with you all in your places, but there we go. Hopefully things will get a little easier with that one. For those of you who don't know, Thinking Place is a place specialist, and over the last 14 years we've worked with over 70 places to help make their place the hero by focusing on the assets and opportunities that a place has got looking ahead. And we've kind of articulated that in a forward-looking place story. We've worked with places to widen place leadership and create active collaborators in support of the place through this approach of creating a narrative. Of course, with coronavirus, the threat is still very potent, but communities and people like you who are on this webinar are looking to the future, because we have to achieve a balance of living alongside the virus with rebuilding lives, businesses, and the fabric of our society. So the very things that we specialise in, that clarity of where a place is going, that clear narrative that people can buy into, wider leadership and people coming together behind the place, is what places are asking us about at the moment, and what is important in terms of recovery and reset. So that kind of takes us to today. The sheer scale, I think, of the task in hand means that places really need to use all their resources, of whatever that means, and the local authority, and there's lots of those on this webinar, are often the enabler of that. They make that happen. They are the glue. And we've seen what can be achieved by active engagement of business, education, and other players as well in place. And we want to explore that some more in this session, so that you can unleash your place pillars of business and education to help your place. As you've seen, we've got an absolutely fantastic lineup of contributors. And the format is, we're going to hear from them, because I think it's important you hear their perspective on what we're talking about today and the role that they can play. And then after that, we're going to open up for a discussion where you can ask questions, and you'll be able to ask questions through the facility on your screen. We're not using chat today. So I will pose as many questions as I possibly can to the panel in the second half of the session, but please start asking questions as we go along. Don't wait till we actually get to the discussion element. So I think at that point we'll get started, and I'm delighted to first welcome Andy Brown, who's the Head of Sustainability at Anglian Water Services. We've worked alongside the operation in Lowestoft on some of these things in terms of forward planning of a place, engagement of business, maximisation of resources, and repurposing what the place can be for. They're a very active contributor in the places where they operate. So I'm really looking forward to what you have to say, Andy.
Thanks very much, John, and pleasure to be here, albeit virtually. So quickly, an introduction to me and to Anglian Water. So I'm the Head of Sustainability with Anglian Water, and I've been in that role for about 6 years now. Anglian Water, a water company that covers kind of from the Humber down to the Thames and across 14, 15 counties, kind of in between. Yeah, and as John says, we're not a newcomer to place, so understanding and being able to contribute to a place is something that we've been really interested in and very involved in, at least for the last kind of 7 years or so. And this really came out of a project which we established with business in the community in a town called Wisbech. So Wisbech is an area which suffers from a number of different issues which prevents it from reaching its full potential. And our CEO a few years ago, after being on a kind of an inspirational visit with BITC, Business in the Community, came back to the office and said, look, where can we make a difference? Where can we understand where there is a kind of change to be made, where we can bring both our own resources but also our supply chain resources kind of to bear for the benefit of all. And it was a kind of an exploration, I guess, in good corporate citizenship. So there's a specific element of what that can lead to, which I want to focus on in a minute. But to give you the context, so as I said, we've been working in Lowestoft for about 6 or 7 years now. We actually seconded a senior manager into the town to go and be our connector with the town, to try and understand where the town needed to go from people in the town, not to take solutions to the town, but to listen and then try and facilitate conversations and activities and action. Actually, that's been quite successful from an educational point of view. Some really interesting kind of programs have been established, and we've seen great development in the secondary school, which is the kind of primary focus there in Wisbech, right the way kind of up until and including the kind of issues that we've had with the current pandemic. We've also developed kind of relationships with the further education college, the College of West Anglia, where we've developed a number of new courses which have seen kind of talent flowing from the people of Wisbech through that program and into our company and our supply chain companies as apprenticeships. But one of the biggest issues in the town was the kind of restriction of its ability to meet the needs of the people of Wisbech, but also the connection with other towns and in particularly Peterborough and Cambridge in the surrounding area. And infrastructure was a big issue. So we have worked over the last few years with the local authority, with other businesses in the town to try and shine a spotlight on that and to bring organisations into the town that could support a new vision and a greater connectedness and a future for the town. That kind of culminated in, Wisbech is the largest town in England, by the way, that's not connected to the mainline railway. So the work we've done there alongside all the others has got Wisbech kind of back into people's plans. We're partially kind of through the process of getting that reconnection to the railway kind of established. We helped the town pull together a vision and a proposal for a Garden Town extension, which would create a kind of a culturally and climatically integrated extension to the town. But what we found as part of that kind of investigation work and the development of that vision was that flooding was the particular issue that was going to hold back the kind of successful economic regeneration of the town. And so that's what I wanted to talk about very briefly now. So Rose, if you could flick up the slide for me, because I think this will kind of show the kind of background and will help me talk against it. Thank you. So you can see there, Wisbech is the kind of town in the centre there, but around it is the Fenland area, and that is an area which is very low lying, subject to flooding, and one which is incredibly important from an agricultural point of view. And in the discussions, we realised that unless we could unlock the flood management issues, we would not see the kind of economic recovery and regeneration of that town, and Wisbech probably would continue to struggle. Now, working together with lots of other partners, what we're proposing is a kind of a new conceptual way of looking at landscape management to particularly manage the kind of the flooding and water management issues. As I say, this is a kind of conceptual but ambitious initiative which is called kind of Future Fenland, and this is bringing together an organisation called Water Resources East, which is a multi-sector collaboration of lots of organisations involved in water planning, the local authorities, but also the agencies who manage the process of dealing with flood management and flood planning. And the idea is to create a kind of coordinated and integrating approach to managing floodwater in there, which will protect the incredibly important environment. And there are a number of very important environmental sites in that area, but also protect the communities, Wisbech primarily, but some of the other rural locations there as well, which could secure areas for leisure and tourism in the future as well. But very importantly, manage both the coastal flood defences and the main river and inland drainage board kind of water management long into the future. And what was really interesting for us in doing this, it also leads to the opportunity of some additional kind of benefits from a kind of public water supply infrastructure and the ability to supply water to that very important food and farming sector in the region. So as I say, this is a conceptual approach that we're working with lots of organisations at the moment, but it is one which is now gaining traction, and one where both government departments, agencies like the Environment Agency, the Cambridge, Greater Cambridge and Peterborough Combined Authority, and the District Council, Fenland District Council, are all completely engaged with at the moment to see whether we can unlock this opportunity for sustainable economic growth by managing the landscape in a kind of in an integrated way. As I say, it's conceptual at the moment. We've got quite a lot of work to do on it, but we have started bringing together that multi-sector task force who will be looking, hopefully in October this year, to kind of start to release some of the findings from the initial reports and development projects that we're developing at the moment. So I think there's some real interest in whether this different approach could be an exemplar and could be repeated and reproduced in other areas in the UK. But what's exciting is that, you know, although there are challenges kind of deeply embedded within it, everybody who's involved in it so far is willing to put those challenges to one side and work together, because the size of the prize at the end of it, if we get it right, is one that we simply can't ignore.
Okay, great, thanks Andy. That's really interesting there in terms of how we see climate, environment, economy all coming together through the prism of place. And next up, it's great to have the MD of Knowsley Safari Park and Knowsley Hall, Edward Perry. With Edward a few years ago, we created a compelling story for Knowsley and then for Prescott, which is a smaller place within it. Edward, as a result of all the work for his sins, now chairs the place board as well. So Edward, we look forward to your views.
John, thanks very much indeed. As John said, I'm MD of the Safari at Knowsley, and we also have a fairly large stately home as well, and an agricultural estate. So we in many ways have experienced a number of sectors during this lockdown, during this crisis. And when people ask me, how am I? And that's a question that we need to ask everybody, because we forget to ask how our colleagues are, how our family members are. I struggle to find the right word. The word we use at work is frazzled, which I think is quite a good word, because mentally it suggests that there's a bit of a short circuit going on in the head. And I sat down with a number of my team, and at times we find it quite hard to process stuff. And I think that comes from a number of factors, but frazzled also suggests physically exhausted. And so we use this word frazzled, and it just seems to cover the bases quite nicely, because what we've all gone through, this extended period of contradictions, illogicalities, inconsistencies, not just in terms of the centrality of government, and it's been a nightmare trying to preempt, predict what government is going to say. but it really challenges one's ability to plan. And I said to my boss, probably in about May time, I've just given up planning, to be honest with you, because whatever I try and put in place is contradicted the following day. So, which doesn't come naturally to me, because I think I'm a rationalist. What I tend to do is that I have the habit of accepting reason very much as the supreme authority. I pluck the facts out of whether it's the press, the media, reading, and I have my trusted sources. But actually what I found in the last 4 months is that most of those trusted sources just, well, I didn't trust, whether it be government, whether it be the science. So we found ourselves really withdrawing into our own worlds. But there were positives, there's no question about it. After the panic we went through, then the paralysis, I call it the COVID coma, where you'd come into work and you'd just see people with these blank expressions over their faces. But there are positives, and I've found, in fact, I was talking to a couple of guests in the safari just a moment ago, actually. Now, this is two families who were suddenly conversing with each other. They'd never have done that, talking to me, saying how they regret taking the safari for granted over the last 7 years and what good value it was. So it's extraordinary how people are beginning to converse, not just with me, but with other families. And there was a lot of love flying around our community, which again, we'd rather forgotten about. It was simply just a transactional relationship between our guests and us. But there is a lot of love. We've got much closer to our membership associations as well. In other words, whether it be BIASA, ALVA, a number of other visitor economy organizations. And this is where we really find that our membership money is well spent. We found that our families are much closer together as well. And of course, there's been that universal support for the NHS and other key workers. I would also suggest, in rather brutal terms, it's been a very good opportunity to restructure, and we're in the middle of recruitment as well. But I do worry about a degree of self-centeredness within ourselves as individuals, but also as businesses. And I think that's pretty natural, because we tend to, in a crisis, withdraw into our own needs. It's those primary needs, the Maslow needs. And we put ourselves first. And often we're too exhausted to appreciate other people's needs. And I found within our workplace, there was not division, but distrust between those who are furloughed and non-furloughed. We've had our first grievance, for instance, from somebody who was furloughed saying, why me? It affected my mental health. Is this going to affect my career in the future? So what worries me is that we're going to revert back to those traditional silos. I think we're very slow coming out of those trenches. And my after dinner speech, and John will know this, is all about those vertical silos. I hate the expressions of private sector, public sector. I hated how we have this Victorian view on society, its education, its health, its housing, where in fact, the place-based approach looks at life horizontally. And it worries me that what this lockdown has done is put us back into our vertical silos. It's not helping the fact that in the private sector, we're talking about survival. It's 2.6 million people on benefits. It's 9.4 million jobs supported by furlough. There are 650,000 fewer jobs since the start of the crisis. And it really worries me that we are going to take time to bounce back. We think we're going to be probably summer next year. I think what Place can do is it's the forum in which to have some pretty deep therapy and conversations between all of the businesses, whether it be reverting back to public sector, the local authority. And I think it's very much a question of what did lockdown mean to me? What did you do? It's about those stories, because we have to understand exactly what we've gone through. There is trauma, there's no question about it. And I think the whole Place concept is a brilliant forum in which to actually talk about those stories. We need to identify mechanisms that can quickly mobilize our communities to deal with pandemics and other natural disasters. There have been amazing examples in the borough of Knowsley about Ocado donating £140,000 to our food bank. We were even approached at the safari to become a temporary morgue. We offered to be a council testing site, and we did a couple of trials on an antibody test as well. But we have to encourage, I think, our local authorities, our councils, to re-engage with business, and business has to re-engage with our local authorities, because I just sense we've retreated back into those vertical silos. And I think the narrative of place is such a good way of drawing us out of this torpor, out of this coma, because it's about focusing on the ambition of the place again. It's needing for us in the private sector to look up from the hand and mouth existence that we are day to day and think about that ambition, about our aspiration. And we must think about doing things very differently. And as business, we must look at the silver linings. They are there, but we have to look very hard to see where those silver linings are. So I would urge all the local authorities and the businesses to really start engaging once again with those narratives of place. It's a great place to tell stories. And I think we do need to have those conversations again, even getting to that deep therapy. Because place, I found, has been the one forum that has continued through lockdown, whether it be working with our schools and our universities and our culture. We've managed to actually lift our heads from the crisis and talk about place, almost in sentimental terms, with a high degree of nostalgia again. So I think it's time to lift ourselves up from that torpor, really start focusing upon the place again, and focusing upon that ambition, that aspiration, and that sense of community, where we're not actually split into those vertical silos, but we're once again a collective community.
Thank you, Edward. Yeah, some great stuff there. So keep on collaborating, keep on coming together. Let's not fall back into the silos. And I love the bit about place being somewhere we can perhaps achieve therapy through that coming together. So some really important points there. And finally, we're going to hear from Professor Dame Sue Black, who is the Pro-Vice Chancellor of Engagement at Lancaster University. Up the road from me, you may have gathered from my dulcet tones that I am a Lancastrian, but there we go. And we worked together on creating a shared story for Lancaster, which is a great project and a very, very powerful end result. So, Sue, looking forward to hearing your thoughts.
Thank you, John, and good afternoon, everybody. I wish I was in Lancaster, but I am in fact 300 miles north of there, and that's one of the things that the lockdown has, of course, all done for us, is that we're not in the places that we expect ourselves to be. So I am the Pro-Vice Chancellor for Engagement at Lancaster University, and I've been in post for nearly 2 years now. And the rationale for the post was that Lancaster University had a significant national and an international profile. We were University of the Year in 2018 and International University of the Year in 2020. And so in some ways we had built a national and international reputation, but our involvement in local and in regional place was significant, but it wasn't as important as we felt that it could be. And that became part of my job. And in fact, John, one of the first projects we ever worked on in my post was working with John, looking at what does it mean to be in Lancaster. Universities are really interesting places because sometimes in a place they've been around for centuries and they literally define the place, if you think about Oxford or Cambridge, for example, or there's perhaps only an institution that's been around for a number of decades. But what is true is that most are anchor institutions. And by that I mean, if they closed their doors, would their immediate vicinities notice that in fact they were no longer in existence? And if you look at Lancaster University in particular, we've got about 4,000 to 5,000 members of staff, and about 60% of those are academic and about 40% are administrative staff, which means that we have a huge employment responsibility within the region. We have about 16,000 students come into us every year. And when you think that Lancaster has a population in the city of 52,000, it means that once a year we suddenly get a huge uprising of about 30% in the population size just in a matter of weeks. So very quickly you begin to see that a city that might not have called itself a university city at some point or another has really become dependent on the university. And that became very, very clear to us throughout COVID. So once we had the lockdown situation, we started to repurpose everything that we could possibly repurpose. So our facilities became used for assessing whether they could be used for emergency hospitals, or again, in terms of body holding areas. Our laboratories were opened up for testing. Our car parks were looked at as if they could be drive-through testing. Our equipment had got shipped off to somewhere in a laboratory in central England. We're hoping that we're going to get it back at some point or another, but it was out there helping with the development and the testing. Our people were furloughed, a significant proportion of them, but what they did was they turned their responsibilities towards volunteering. So we had a huge amount of both staff and student volunteering at a local and a regional level, which we'd perhaps not had before. Our accommodation was opened up for frontline services who needed to be able to shield from their families. And our academics, as you would expect, their skills were used by the government, by the local resilience forum, and to advise on businesses. So that rich seam of a tapestry of what a university is has a really important place and part to play in a crisis response. But just in terms of one project that I'd like to talk to you about is that we identified very quickly that because Lancaster and Morecambe is an area of multiple deprivation, we were in a situation where we had a lot of young people who were going to be experiencing educational poverty. And what we meant by that is the schools were contacting them through digital means, but a significant number of young pupils did not have either the devices or they didn't have the internet capability to be able to link with their schools. But not only their schools, it was with their friends, and the whole impact on health and well-being for a young person who can't socialize with their friends, who aren't interacting with their school in terms of their education. You can see if they're out of that for 15, 20 weeks, then that becomes a significant impactor on their own health, their own well-being, and on their own education. So as a consortium and as something that a university can do, we convened the power and we were able to raise about £130,000 that allowed us to purchase over 500 digital devices. Vodafone gave us 3 months free internet access to all of those families, and we put out something like 1,500 activity packs to primary schools. So the impact that we could make, not just educationally on the young people in our region, but also socially and environmentally and in terms of their health and well-being, was extremely important. But what a university can do is it can take what is an opportunity in a crisis, and there is always opportunity in a crisis, to say we can solve an immediate problem, but in solving that, how can we actually increase and keep that running? So what we've done with that Connecting Kids project that we called it, is that we also backed that up with mentoring from our students. So now all of these young people are paired up with an academic mentor. And this fits into something that's called the Morecambe Bay curriculum. And the Morecambe Bay curriculum is a brand new form of educational curriculum that is very heavily based on sustainability, green energy, and place. And it forms the core of our big project, that's Eden Project North. And if you haven't come across Eden Project North, please go and have a look at the most iconic image you can imagine of these mussel shells that sit on Morecambe Beach. And behind that is a huge social enterprise, not just for increasing tourism, perhaps 1 million people a year coming into Morecambe, but the way that we can impact on the education of young people, on the environment in terms of green sustainability, but also on the economic development of the area. If the government is truly going to live by its word and to level up its agenda in the areas where place and region are significantly important, then something like Eden Project North couldn't be more shovel ready for Boris's build, build, build if we'd actually gone out there and planned it. But what we've been able to do is to use the crisis to get us started on that project early, even before we put the first brick in the ground. So universities are really important anchors within many institutions. And frequently people don't know what the university can do for them. But increasingly, as we've all signed up to the Civic Universities Agreement, then you will find that universities are becoming much more friendly towards their responsibility locally and regionally.
Thank you, Sue. Yeah, a really great perspective there. I think the universities, what a tremendous resource, what a very powerful player in the place, an enabler of change. And just through that one project that was being described there. Really, really important. So I can see some questions rolling in. So please use the Q&A facility on your screen, and we'll get to as many of these as we possibly can. I'd kind of like to start with one we've got here, which is probably one that I will address to each of you. And there's a lot of talk about reset as opposed to just recovery. And I wonder what you think your organisation or sector, how it can help push places beyond just recovery and into doing things differently. So perhaps I'll start with you on that one, Sue.
So I think the Eden Project probably epitomizes that extremely well. There is no doubt that we do need to recover, and let's face it, universities also as a business have a significant amount of recovery to do. A large proportion of our students, and therefore our income, are overseas students. And although our admissions are up, what we don't know is how many of our students will actually turn up on the day. So we're very conscious as a business ourselves of how it's not just the recovery, but it's the opportunity that says, if we can actually do a lot more of our teaching in a blended and a mixed way, actually does that create opportunities for us? And certainly when you look at the government's agenda, and I do say providing the government actually maintains that agenda of levelling up and focus on region with institutes of technology, with kickstart programs, all of those, then I think there is a real opportunity in those to not only reset those elements of your business that come back to that sort of level of operation, but it does open an opportunity for you to go into different fields. And it's almost as if adversity gives you permission to change things, because we become a bit complacent when things are going well and you don't become innovative. The great innovation comes when you have the need.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Edward, do you have a reflection in terms of the business role and moving the place that little bit further forward rather than just taking the easy route?
Yeah, I think it is. It's recovery and reset, the concurrent activities, which I think is very challenging for business leaders because it is about cash flow from day to day, but we're determined to reset. And some of those opportunities that Sue was talking about, we have grasped, and sometimes they're the simplest things. We now in the Safari, we are offering online visits to the Safari, for instance. So we recognize that we're not going to have school kids necessarily coming to the Safari. But it's also been an amazing opportunity just to think, it's hard to say this actually, but why do I do formal education? In other words, you could argue that a school group of 30 kids comes to the Safari, they're so hyped up with excitement, they're only thinking about the lunch and the bus trip. But why don't we actually completely invert our education, go to our community, in other words, not have educationists, but community officers. So we really target those sections of the community that really could benefit. So we're talking about well-being, we're talking about health, green health, and really, and I think this lockdown's given us the thought time to really do that. On an operational side, we now have timed booked slots in the Safari by popular demand. That's from the guests and our own staff. We will keep those. We have table service now in the restaurant. And also what I found is that the teams that are back unfurloughed have this renewed unity, friendship and passion for the job as well. But I think it is on a place side. We're lucky because the Borough of Knowsley has a year of culture coming up in 2022. We also have a Shakespeare theatre that's opening in 2022 as well. We also have next year the Good Business Festival coming to the borough as well. And we've found it really important to have those foci, those events on the horizon that just unite us through place. And as I said earlier on, what's kept us a lot of the Zooms has been going about those place conversations. So we need to engage as business with our local authority once again. We need to connect. We need to understand what really motivates us. And as I said, that place is the ideal forum to get those conversations going.
Andy, your view, what from Anglian Water's perspective, you know, how are you helping the places move that bit forward?
Yeah, so I mean, again, I think this is really important, and you're absolutely right. It is recovery, but it is also reset. We have a once in a generation, once in a lifetime opportunity to try and redirect the kind of focus of energies. And you know, at a national level, there's a huge amount of kind of work from businesses coming forward and saying, right, we have got to build back better. Let's do things in a different way. And you know, my CEO is co-chair of a thing called the Corporate Leaders Group, which is kind of working around climate change, and they're working together with some other organisations to collaboratively kind of push that message through government. But that's at a national level. I think, you know, at a place level as well, what's been really interesting for me, and I do a lot of work on kind of mental well-being, is how people have reconnected with their local place. You know, the fact that you are, you know, we have been confined within our homes to work, and back in the days of only being allowed out for an hour's exercise, people have rediscovered their places, and particularly their green spaces. And imagine a world where we've been locked down, where we hadn't got those green spaces. You know, that for me, I think is changing people's perception of what they need and how we need to build that into the way we plan our current developments, but future developments as well, to ensure that, you know, we put this kind of blue, the green infrastructure at the heart of places and place-based thinking.
Okay, thank you. So keep asking questions. The guys are here for you. Sue, I've got one here about, do you have any reflections or insights as to how the university can support towns beyond the place in which it's located?
Oh gosh, yes. And I think most universities probably do. I think it's almost a sort of ripple effect, in that the closer the town is to you, the more sort of the focus is on that town. But I know that we impact on virtually all the towns in our region because we actively go out. And whether it's collaboration with the further education colleges, or it's in collaboration with the businesses, the health authorities, or the councils, it is that network. And again, I think that's where the sort of civic universities network becomes really important, because it means that throughout any region, you are interacting with all of the civic players within that area. But the network of universities, and there aren't that many of them, it might feel like there are millions of universities in the UK, but there aren't. There's only 130. And they are all actually incredibly well networked as well. So that when there's a good idea happen somewhere, doesn't take long for it to be shared with another university or with another college. And I think I would like to see the educational system, the post-school educational system, because I can't talk about the school level education system, just coming that bit closer together. So to give you an example, Lancaster University was asked to be the Department for Education's point of contact for the academic institutions for COVID in Lancashire. And I think it was the first time that all the universities and all of the further educational colleges actually got together and talked to each other in the same room. We've all had individual little conversations and partnerships with each other, but as a collective educational force, we'd not come together before. So doing more of that. I always say that you gain more by sharing than you do keeping it to yourself. So you keep things to yourself, you're the only person that benefits. But if you actually can get out there and share it, actually the rewards that come back are significantly enhanced. So again, I think COVID gave us an opportunity and almost gave us permission to stop being suspicious about all the other people around us. They're just the folk we haven't met yet. They're just the friends we haven't made yet. Get out there and do something bigger and better.
Okay. Andy, I've got one for you here specifically. What do you think the impact of the pandemic has had on people's views about climate change, and do you think that will be sustained?
Wow, that's a really interesting one. So I think actually the pandemic hasn't kind of drawn people's attention away from climate change as much as I was expecting it to have done. I think you know, I think this has really driven home the kind of fragility of the life that we all have become accustomed to. And so people are more aware and more open to understanding some of the other big challenges we face. And climate change is obviously that next big one. What I would really hope is that we can take some of the lessons and some of the behavioural changes that we have all made in adapting to life under COVID into what will be the new normal. Now, I know the government want to get us back into offices, and that's important for kind of getting some of that spend back into the high street where offices might be located. But do we need to be travelling kind of up and down the country to have face-to-face meetings with each other? Do we need to be flying here, there, and everywhere to have meetings with each other? No, I don't think so. So I think we will hopefully see a really positive shift towards a more kind of educated approach to what we can and shouldn't do in the future. But it would be interesting to see whether that continues as we come out of lockdown, and hopefully when we get a vaccine and things truly start to return to normal, whether people will continue to maintain their behaviours and think about doing things in a way which will deliver a kind of safer long-term future from a climatic point of view.
Okay. Edward, I wonder, one of the big things that I think we've seen is places losing confidence and people, communities losing confidence, quite understandably. What can business do, given everything that you've said about, obviously you've got to make a profit, you've got a responsibility to the people you employ. How can a business help place become confident again?
I found myself the other day, it was a meeting with our council, almost I found myself saying, don't bother us at the moment, please, because we're fighting for survival. And I thought at the end of it, no, that's completely wrong. We've got to dig ourselves out of this hole. I think it comes from good leadership. I think we've got to be absolutely realistic. I've said that we're probably not going to recover our financial situation until September next year. We've done our worst case scenarios. We've benefited from furlough. We've benefited from the CBIL scheme, and the VAT reduction is an absolute godsend. So we are truly grateful. But I think we've got to snap out of it, John, to be in many ways. It's almost like this coma. It's always this woe is me. And I think it does need place leadership, and it has to come from the private sector. I would be asking my place board to really start to galvanize that hope and that ambition. It has to come from the business leadership. We can start with our own organizations. We're doing a fair amount of press at the moment, talking about the positives about the safari being open. I meet with my MP virtually, just so that he knows exactly what situation we're in. I reflect also the visitor economy within the borough as well. So I think it's up to leaders like myself to really start talking the narrative, because I found myself embarrassingly the other day in a Zoom meeting saying, don't bother us because we're fighting for survival. That's not the approach. We have to have that more optimistic approach that we're Knowsley, as you know, John, we've had that narrative. It's about storytelling. It's about picking ourselves up collectively. It's about identifying what's great and what are the commonalities that makes this place a great place to live in, to work in, to invest in, and to visit. So I would place a lot of that responsibility on shoulders such as mine.
Okay. I think as we look ahead, there's probably little doubt that the future is going to be greyer, messier, fuzzier than ever before. And I wonder how you think you might help places manage that. Can I chuck that at you, Sue?
I thought you might. Very kind of you. I want to go back to something as well that Andy said, and it is for us in many ways it's been an incredible shock, but a really positive sort of life-affirming shock in some ways that says, we can run a university from 300 miles away. I don't need to be on the train every day going to London. I don't need to fly out to any of our 4 campuses across the world. And where we were worried about how we were going to meet our sustainability and our green energy and our carbon emission problems, actually, COVID has helped us solve that, because we're doing so much of our work now in this kind of an electronic way, which we've been saying for the last 20 years or more, oh, the future is going to be electronic. But you know, we never ever got there. Well, we're here now. And part of the gloom and the doom and the dismal comes from our media. So when you watch the news and you listen to the radio, it's all terribly woe is me. It is all always looking for the negative. And if you get a positive story, it's the and only, you know, it's that sort of little snippet at the end. I'd really like to tell the press, can you just get behind the country? Can you get behind the business owners who are trying to make their way forward? Can we be positive about it? Why do we always have to be negative? And I think what will get us out of this quicker and probably better is if we can turn it to a positive mental attitude. My glass is always half full. It's never, ever half empty. I'm a good Scotswoman in that regard. You definitely don't want a half empty glass. I want it to be half full. And the more we can do that, then I think the quicker we will come out of it, the better we will come out of it. And the more we will be able to recognize who needs the help. Where is the real help required that can level up everybody's agenda? So I'm actually quite optimistic, I have to say.
Good stuff. One I've got here that's interesting, and we hear a lot of this. I guess I'll direct this one particularly at Andy. We hear a lot of people in places talking about, oh, the green economy is going to be really important going forward. I guess the question is, what is the green economy? And surely it can't help and work for every place.
Yeah, well, I guess I don't know every place, but yeah, yes. So yeah, well, the green economy can mean a lot to different people and different locations. I guess from our perspective, you know, the government has been asking us in terms of, you know, what contribution can we make towards the green recovery? So, you know, actually, if you look at specifically what we need to do in terms of bringing forward some of our infrastructure delivery and development, you know, that will create direct jobs from employing, you know, more people to deliver that, but it will create kind of flow of resources and funds into the consultancies and the kind of supply chains that we work with. And all of that is associated with a kind of, you know, there is a green element to securing our water resources and providing those. I mean, if you look at the Wisbech example that we're talking about there, you know, again, that is about delivering a kind of a greener recovery. It's about working alongside with the natural resources that we have in that area to deliver some of the other kind of non-green infrastructure. So, you know, Wisbech would like to develop, you know, an additional kind of 10 to 12,000 homes. We can't do that at the moment because of, you know, because of environmental constraints. Can we come up with a green way of delivering or unlocking that development? Yes, we think we can, and that's what that project is about. So, you know, that green infrastructure can unlock traditional kind of investment and jobs, but, you know, with a mind to creating you know, a plan which is climate proof going forwards as well. So something that supports both the new development, but also, you know, supports the existing community and makes that that area more resilient. But then, you know, then there are all sorts of things in terms of, you know, the drive towards you know, renewable energy and capacity. You know, if you look off the east coast, we have got, you know, the largest area of kind of offshore wind farm. So why would we be buying those resources and materials in from anywhere else in the world when we could be using Lowestoft, Great Yarmouth and other areas along the coast to develop, deliver and service those in the long term?
Yep, totally get that. Keep the questions going, not too long to go now in terms of asking questions. I've got one for each of you here now, which I could kind of do with like a 1-sentence answer for each bit. So at a time, I suppose, of coronavirus now, what do you see as the single biggest opportunity and the single biggest challenge that you have in the place environment? Go on, Edward.
The challenge, start with that one, is I think I've struggled with the centrality of this COVID crisis. I would really like to see it come down to a local level. We've got the networks, they are working, and I just would like to see more of that responsibility coming down to a local level. And I think that's when business will become more involved. And it'll come, I have no doubt, I hope so anyway. The opportunities, well, it is about reset. There's nothing better than a good crisis or a recession to really focus your mind on structure and on waste. And I think picking up on what Sue was saying, definitely glass half full, there are silver linings. And I'm really excited about the future, really excited.
Sue, have you got an opportunity and a challenge?
I think the challenge, the short-term challenge is just getting over the inertia. So getting people back into the way of thinking, actually, what can I do differently? Maybe the job I had for the last 20 years no longer exists, but what skills have I got? What else could I be doing? Almost seeking the permission to do something different. And that's quite scary. So although it's a challenge and it's a scary challenge, I'm also, very sort of conscious of the Innovation Nation concept that says, somebody that fails 12 times is much more experienced than somebody who never fails. And it's just, getting over that feeling that failure is something that, you can't cope with, but failure is not actually getting up and doing it again. The challenge, I think the opportunity for me is what I see in communities. So it's been able to bring back communities and place together with a renewed sense of both purpose and identity, and being able to capitalize on that, I think, is something that will be really powerful.
Andy?
Okay, so we've been doing a lot of work during the COVID crisis with business in the community and help them to develop and manage their thing called the National Business Response Network. And that's been kind of matching up the needs of local charities and local communities with businesses who might be able to offer support. And that's been fantastic. And there have been, I think, around 2,000 matches across the UK. The opportunity is, post-COVID, why would we shut that down? So how do we make that business as usual going forward so that network is there and is an active brokerage system? The challenge, I think, is related more to the work we've done kind of in depth, in deep dive, really trying to transformationally change places like Lowestoft and Wisbech. Now, how do you scale that up? So we're doing it successfully in Wisbech. I think the work in Lowestoft is fantastic and is accelerating at a pace which is beyond my expectation, which is great. So how do we replicate that and try and get businesses connected and committed to making a difference in their location up and down the UK, so that we can develop, a greater reset and recovery place by place?
Okay, one that's an important one, I think. Obviously, we've heard all the talk about how this is disproportionately affecting young people. We've got a question here about how can business and the universities support young people from low-income communities who'll be leaving full-time education and trying to enter work or university or apprenticeships without the resources and without the grades that they need. Sue, can I start with you?
Of course you can. It's a very real problem. It's a very real problem in the area in which our university operates. It's extremely important that what we have is a solid pipeline and connection, so that we're very strongly connected to our further education colleges, but also to our schools and also to our employers. So it's producing the network that ensures that these young people don't fall in the cracks between the stones. It's about helping them to write a CV. It's about helping them get the opportunity for an interview, for either traineeship or for a job for employment. And it is just about ensuring that we understand that education is not for an elite. Education is for everybody, and we should be in a position where we can help everybody attain what is their potential. So we found with our Connecting Kids project, where young people couldn't get onto the internet, they were finding they couldn't apply for jobs. They couldn't get the skills that they needed to be able to give them the training that says, you know, how do I turn up for a job? What do I say? Is this the right thing to put in my CV? All of that help can be there for them. And every university has a widening participation element to it. And that's about saying that education is for all. It's not for a group that can afford it. It is for everyone. And the government has a big role to play in that, to ensure that those who are coming from economic hardship areas have got the support, that the barrier isn't about funding. Because if the potential is there, then we should be able to give that opportunity to match that potential.
Okay, we're getting near the end of time now, so I think just very quickly, can I go to each of you? I'll start with you, Andy. When it comes to your business's relationship with Place, what's been the one biggest thing you've learned during the pandemic?
So during the pandemic, that there are more needs out there that you can support than you realize. It's just surfacing those and finding those. So you know, that's where the network, the business in the community kind of network has been absolutely invaluable, about surfacing those and then being able to connect resources into delivering something of real value, instant kind of value out into the community.
Okay, Edward?
It's picking up on what Andy said. It's been taken for granted. I think what it's done to all of us is to make us realise that we have some wonderful things on our own doorstep, and that was just to quote those two families at the safari this morning. And I think it's a greater appreciation of work, what really the passionate work. So I think that, yeah, it's that sense of place has been enhanced and improved.
Sue, finally?
I think the biggest lesson for us was, no matter how important you think you are, you can't do it alone. Everything happens in a partnership, and engagement is about partnership, whether with one individual, one business, one community. You can't do it alone. You need the help, and to facilitate that help, you've got to go out and you've got to connect with people.
Brilliant. Okay, well, that hour has zoomed by, to use a terrible pun. But anyway, can I just thank the panelists who've been absolutely brilliant, answering lots of challenging questions from you guys out there, none of which they knew in advance. But I think you got a lot of insight there in terms of Place, and hopefully things that you can use in your places. So thank you very much for those of you who joined the webinar today. Hope you enjoyed it. There will be more coming along the way, and can I wish that you all have a really good day.